Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us today. This is the NOWRDC Roadmap 3.0 release and overview. We are very excited to have you with us today for this release. This webinar will be recorded and it will be on our website hopefully next week. So if you know someone who missed it and wants to learn a little bit more, feel free to share this with them. We'll definitely be sharing this on our social and other places as well. I would like to welcome you all and first introduce myself. My name is Christine Sloan, and I'm a program manager with the National Offshore Wind Research and Development Consortium. With myself today, I also have Walt Musial, who leads the Offshore Wind Research Platform at NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, and I will let Walt introduce himself a little bit later on in our webinar. What I do want to ask first, folks, if you could please make sure that you are muted throughout the duration of our webinar today. If you have any questions that you want to ask either Walt or myself, please feel free to put those in the chat. We'll have some time later at the end of this webinar to answer some of those questions that you may have. But please do stay on mute and please include any questions that you may have in the chat. So what I'm going to do now is jump right into our presentation today of Roadmap 3.0. So as you can see here, and you may be familiar with the consortium's first two roadmaps, 1.0 and 2.0. This 3.0 is just our newest update. It is published as of right now, as of today. So it is on our website, and I'll post the URL of that in just one moment, but it is live and you can go access it now at this time. And really what the roadmap, if you're not familiar what this is for the consortium, it's really our overarching technical guidance document for all R&D topics. These are generally updated prior to new solicitations. So as you can see from our roadmap 1.0 and 2.0 to 3.0, these happen every maybe 1.5 years or so to 2 years. And what we do, one of the main functions of these roadmaps is that this allows us to put it all in one place, all these different R&D priorities for the industry. And then our solicitations for proposals may draw from the most current roadmap version. So our next solicitation, which I'll talk a little bit later on in this webinar, would draw from this roadmap 3.0. What I'll also say is here at the bottom of your screen now is our website to go and access the roadmap yourself directly. That is www.nationaloffshorewind.org/toolbox. If you go to our website, just nationaloffshorewind.org, you would then want to go to resources, which is at the top of your page, and then toolbox. If you don't go directly to /toolbox, you'll be able to find it if you go to our website right now. So what I would like to do is tell you a little bit about the methodology of how we got to this roadmap 3.0. I mentioned Walt is here with me today. He has been very supportive to the consortium as lead author on this roadmap, and I'll let him introduce himself after we get to the next slide. But Walt, thank you for your help and support throughout this process. Some of the topic areas, or I should say all the topic areas in Roadmap 3.0 are inclusive of industry needs, and they're not limited by earlier versions of the roadmap. So for example, 1.0 or 2.0. And what this means is just that and I'll talk about this in the next couple of bullets, but we reached out to our industry members and other folks at the national scale and really want to be very inclusive of all these different industry needs. And we didn't want to necessarily limit ourselves by any of these earlier versions. What we really want to do is make sure that we're looking at the needs of today and of the near future, and that's what we put into this Roadmap 3.0. I'll also say that these topic areas were based on new information and no topics were retired. So what you may see if you're familiar with some of the earlier versions, there may be some difference in how different focus areas are focused on, and Walt will go into a little bit of this as well. There may be more emphasis on certain topic areas and less emphasis on some others. But no topics were removed from previous versions. In order to get this survey of all the different R&D needs for the industry, for the nation, we did a survey of all of our consortium members and our research and development advisory group, which we did earlier this year. That was extremely helpful, and some of you who may have responded to that survey, I thank you. And also, after we did that survey, we did a number of focus groups. 3 focus groups, 1 for each pillar of our roadmap. This was done with our R&D committee and other members of the consortium, again, earlier this year. This is also extremely valuable for the consortium to really dig deeper into some of these needs that fall under each of these pillars that we've organized these different R&D challenge areas under. So thank you all again who may have participated in those as well. Those are extremely helpful. Along with that, we also coordinated with the Department of Energy and BOEM, including interviews with 9 different lead design engineers for floating systems. All of this was extremely helpful. And what I'll do is allow Walt to go into that a little bit deeper and to understand a little bit more of what that may have entailed, because Walt was also extremely helpful in these efforts as well. So what I'll do is I'll go to the next slide, and Walt, I would ask you to please just give yourself a brief introduction and go ahead with the rest of our presentation.
Thank you, Christine. So my name is Walt Musial. I'm principal engineer, and I'm the offshore wind lead at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I've been at NREL about 32 years and worked on land-based systems, and now for about 18 years offshore wind. So we're really excited about this consortium and the roadmap. And I'm just going to go through the some of the highlights of what we did, and then I'll review the different sections of the roadmap that are in there right now. A lot of them you'll recognize, but as Christine said, I've gone through this document now, and nothing was really sacred. We went through and stripped out some of the stuff that may not be as applicable right now, or we changed the emphasis to allow us to focus on things that were more current in nature. And these are topics and ideas that came largely from ourselves, but also from the interviews and the breakout sessions that we did with each of the focus areas. So you'll recognize the document. If you've read the other ones, it will sound a lot the same, but we didn't. We changed the tones and updated a lot of the goals and targets, and so you'll see that as we go through. Why don't you shift to the next slide, and I'm going to work on just going through what the top level changes were. We added a few new topics, and we made some modifications that were really emphasis changes on certain areas that we know were needed to get more attention, let's say, either because the consortium hadn't addressed those in previous rounds or previous solicitations, or because those topics are becoming more central to the success of the industry. So starting with the new topics, we added at least 4 new topics. The decommissioning and life extension and infrastructure repowering, you'll see, is added to the Pillar 1 section. And this is really driven by the fact that a lot of actually some of the projects in Europe are reaching their end of life, and decisions are being made on decommissioning. So if a project gets to its design life, the developer the operator has to make a decision about whether to take the project down, continue to run it, to extend the life by possible retrofits and changing that infrastructure. In this consortium and this new topic, we also really want to consider design life changes to maybe some of the components are already capable of lasting longer than the design life, and we need to make more proactive decisions about how life extension will take place and what the life of a project should be. Earlier projects, you would have seen 20-year design life expectancies. Currently, we're looking at 25 to 30 years, and we're not sure where is that optimum and where should it be, both from an engineering and from a economic standpoint. So we're excited about looking at that. Floating wind option and operations are becoming more mainstream now, and we're starting to look at the emergence of a commercial floating industry. So you're gonna see a lot more emphasis on floating. almost everybody we talked to in the floating design area, the engineers and the developers, emphasize the fact that industrialization of the floating supply chain is probably the most important area for reducing the cost down from where it is today to where it needs to go to in order to achieve lower costs at utility scale. And so you'll see a lot of that in here. And then workforce development is an expansion, probably beyond the 3 pillars, but it's an important part that's in the roadmap. And the roadmap's not limited necessarily to the 3 pillars in their first form that we had. So some of the key modifications, you'll see more emphasis on enabling large turbines. Almost all projects now are going to depend on the 12 to 15 megawatt class designs that are out there right now, but most of those turbines have not even been tested in the water yet, and that means that there's going to be an increased emphasis on making sure that they work, and that's going to be prevalent throughout this, along with as I said, the floating emphasis on floating substructures and how those designs integrate with the US supply chain, which right now is very small in relationship to the amount of capacity that's being developed, and we need to accelerate those changes to the supply chain to make the US economy benefit from all this development that's going to happen. You'll see restructuring of the MidOcean side of things in Pillar 2 that relate to data inputs. The accuracy of the models really depend on getting better data into the models. And then you'll see an expanded scope with conflicts, because as deployment expands and the cumulative impacts become better known, it's important that the industry stays on top of that and addresses the technologies that are necessary to mitigate as much as possible the conflicts and make us good neighbors in the ocean. Next slide. So Pillar 1, this is really an outline of what's in the roadmap, and you can, as Christine said, you can download that from the URL and read it yourself. You recognize the structure is pretty close, but we have the Pillar 1 is really divided into 3 sections, and I'll show that in this slide and the next one. But it's specific technologies for fixed bottom systems, specific technologies for floating offshore wind technology, and then technologies that really are combined, or they're more agnostic to whether it's floating or fixed. For fixed bottom systems, we're interested in support structures. There's an example in the photo to the right of the Esteco float out concrete base. That's it's really a fixed bottom system, but it has a float out capability that allows the elimination in some cases of the heavy lift vessels that are necessary to install these systems. And we're investigating, as an example, these types of foundations, which might be economical when you don't have to worry about the heavy lift vessels and the compliance with the Jones Act. Modeling of array and inter-array effects. There's been a lot of support for this area in the consortium. At least 5 projects have been funded in this, but there's still a need to look at blockage effects and other array effects that may impact large-scale development. Also, I think the emphasis in array needs to shift toward the reliability and O&M side of things, not just on power performance. For floating offshore wind technology, we've looked at mooring concepts, and also a lot of the consortium's work has focused on shallow and deep water mooring systems. This needs to continue, I think, to some degree, as we realize that the mooring systems that we have right now may not address all of the issues, especially with respect to the size of the footprint in deep water and the possible loading effects in shallow water that would enable us to install floating systems in water depths between 60 and 90 meters. And that's really an area where there's a lot of resource, but the technology is really designed for slightly deeper waters. Floating substructures, there's still going to be a big emphasis on that. And then large floating array technologies is something that we focus on internationally, and there's starting to become an awareness that we may not the same array controls for large systems that we use in fixed bottom may not work in large floating arrays, and there's other differences that need to be addressed, such as floating substations and so forth. So we'll be seeing more research in those areas. And next slide. The common areas are about enabling large turbines. I think either whether it's fixed or floating, the large turbines are getting placed on these platforms, and we need to understand the interaction between the large turbines and the platforms. Hurricane resilient systems, about a half of the US resource is actually south of Virginia and in the Gulf of Mexico, and we need better research and development to understand the risks of placement in hurricane regions, and the how to mitigate on storms, and just understanding the uncertainty that arises when you have these very rare but violent tropical storms that come in. Floating arrays in the Great Lakes, and the Great Lakes has about 10 to 15% of the US resource. Offshore power system design and innovation, and these are really what technologies that address the hardware of the system out at sea and where it connects to the land-based grid. And by example, we're looking at HVDC systems versus AC systems, better routes, or ways to address the cable landings as they come ashore, and better array cable designs and layouts. The next one is really about storage, and a much bigger emphasis in the industry now about different types of storage, and the introduction of hydrogen as a means for creating reliability and flexibility in the system, but not just hydrogen, battery storage, and how those storage systems integrate to make the systems more reliable as we reach higher and higher penetrations. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the decommissioning and life extension of these systems is an added feature. So let's go to pillar 2. And that's it's a smaller part of the roadmap, but you'll recognize a lot of the same areas. The MidOcean Research and the comprehensive wind resource assessments that are necessary are just key to understanding how much energy we can make and the economics around that. But there's still work that needs to be done to validate those resource assessments, and to understand how the existing data sets can be extended to more broadly, both the satellite measurements and the models, using existing data. And so existing MidOcean data comes a lot from the buoy system that we have out there, but there's a need to characterize those inputs through additional modeling that would help us improve the inputs to the system, so that we can study unstable and stable atmospheres, so that we can study climate change and other characteristics that are important to the large scale deployment of offshore wind along the eastern seaboard and other regions as well. One of the things that was funded in one of the previous solicitations was a MidOcean reference site at Woods Hole. There's a question, do we need another one? Is that regional specific site enough to handle the entire United States? And maybe there's a need to extend that. And then from a physical site characterization, we're really talking about understanding the seabed and creating databases that allow better insights as to what the geophysical and geotechnical characteristics are, so that advanced planning can be done on sites that are throughout the United States. Okay, let's do pillar 3 now, which is it's really 3 areas. It's the installation, it's the operation and maintenance, and it's the supply chain. And breaking that down into those 3, we start with installation topics. These are technologies to reduce siting and construction operation conflicts. And this is a broadened topic. It's actually one of the most popular ideas that the consortium members put forward, because it covers a lot of the issues that arise when they try to site projects, and it relates to solving some of these problems, relates to reducing the cost of these systems. And just several examples that I can give: reducing conflicts with avian interactions, reducing conflicts with marine mammals with respect to pile driving and creating alternatives to those technologies, reducing conflicts with radar in the military, and reducing conflicts with fishing, which is a big issue. And the fishermen and need to work. We need to work with the fishermen really to coexist in the same space. And there's many ideas on how to reduce those conflicts, and this is where we would address those. We also need to continue to look at installation strategies for the larger turbines, which impose unique problems as we get to larger and larger sizes. The infrastructure needs to upgrade. The ships and the vessels and the ports need to upgrade, as well as the manufacturing and supply chain facilities. On the operation and maintenance side, there's still a big, strong emphasis on digitization and big data, and what we can do with that through advanced analytics. Everybody's probably heard the digital twin term, and really that's maybe becoming a buzzword, but the idea is that we don't have to measure everything that we're interested in, and we can use sensors and digitization sparingly to get a lot more information out of a system. We have a need, I think, as the large turbines get deployed, to make sure that they work and to make sure that they're reliable. And the next bullet is the large turbine and substructure testing methods. Is one of the ways we can head off field failures, is to make sure we do a really good job in the laboratory before these turbines get deployed, so that we catch the startup problems that new systems typically have. There's a topic on high sea state technician transfer solutions. This is just really a fairly narrow area of making sure we can get to the turbines and that the turbines have accessibility, especially when we start looking at the West Coast, where the wave and sea states are much higher. Operation, maintenance, and strategy tools really relates to the innovations and the operations strategies that would minimize the labor at sea and maximize the cost effectiveness of the operation and maintenance systems. Some examples might be drones or automated vessels that can address these turbines without human contact, or just strategies for remote sensing that would enable diagnosis of failures and problems before anyone has to move offshore to address the problem there. Offshore wind operation and maintenance, I mean, for floating systems is a new area that was added. And this is really something that we don't understand. It's everything so far is extrapolated from what we know about fixed bottom operation and maintenance costs, but we do really need to understand floating aspects specifically. And that's what this area is all about. And let's go to the final slide, I think, is the supply chain. And so we're looking for in the supply chain, this really extends to all of the areas and in some way, but we're looking for solutions to accelerate US supply chains through unique and advanced materials that can be developed like concrete in local ports where steel fabrication may not be as accessible. Industrialization, as I mentioned, of the floating supply chain is something that's everybody is interested in and is a key element to lowering the cost of floating wind and getting it into the range where fixed bottom is right now, so that we can build utility scale projects. And right now, every project in the floating industry has been a one-off facility. The picture on the right is a picture of the Steesdale Tetraspar Foundation that's being assembled in Denmark. And this is an example of a technology that Henrik Steesdale has been talking about for several years, where the components in this system can be manufactured at fairly large number of different facilities and shipped to a place where it's assembled, so that the number of vendors, the vendor base can be expanded and the costs can come down. The next two bullets in this list are about the grid, and they're divided into two pieces. One is really the expansion and access to the transmission system, and that is a really near-term issue, especially on the East Coast, where you have a limited number of points of interconnection and access to the grid. As we get to a 30 gigawatt by 2030 goal, we may deplete the available or the easy access points of interconnection and need to come up with more innovative solutions to share transmission across regions, across ISOs, and just within wind farm to wind farm. And those ideas can be explored through this task. And then the grid integration and market impacts topic area is really about the integration of the whole system into the land-based grid, and including other technologies and storage as well. And we do that through production cost modeling and power flow modeling and reliability analysis to increase flexibility and reliability of the grid, or at least to maintain the current status quo of those reliability issues as we introduce more and more renewables. And the next bullet is about port design and cost studies. We're really at the point where we know we need ports. The question is, where do you put them and how much will they cost and who's going to pay for them? So these studies need to be developed, and they need to be developed not just on the New England northeast rather area, but throughout the whole country. And there may be different requirements, and they may be integrated with the supply chain needs through manufacturing, and they have to be able to accommodate the vessels. And we're we're not we haven't done a deep dive on how those ports differ when we're talking about deploying a commercial scale floating project versus a commercial scale fixed bottom project. So these are questions that need to be studied. And then finally, looking at the workforce development and the needs of the workforce, both in the quality of what they're learning and the quantity of programs that are available throughout the nation. So Christine, I'll stop there and hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Walt. The consortium definitely appreciates your support in updating this Roadmap 3.0. It's been fantastic. What I'll talk to a little bit now that we've kind of stepped through most of the roadmap together and provided that high-level overview, and is talk about a little bit what this Roadmap 3.0 means for a possible next solicitation for the consortium. So the consortium will be releasing a new solicitation tentatively titled Innovation in Offshore Wind Solicitation 2.0, and that's targeted to be released in late August of this year. So what I'll also just mention, which I think I mentioned earlier in the webinar as well, is that this roadmap is not necessarily a definitive indicator of what's going to be in this solicitation or future solicitations, but rather lays out key issues for R&D from which different challenge areas may be chosen for a solicitation. So what you'll also see here is that it's likely in this next solicitation in August that it'll be more focused in the number of challenge areas than in prior solicitations, which were quite broad. And so you'll also see that there's going to be approximately $4 million that will be available in this next August solicitation as well. We are also targeting the first week in August for a topic preview that'll likely be in a webinar such as this. We did that for the last solicitation as well, just to provide some of that preview of what's going to be in that solicitation. And that full solicitation is targeted to be coming out again in late August. We're aiming to have reviews complete of all those proposals by the end of 2021, with award announcements in January 2022, so early next year. And the consortium is also targeting a second proposal call, which will likely be structured as a second round under this same August solicitation, and that's going to be targeted for the first half of 2022. So you were really looking at two different solicitations, one for this late August, and then another one in the first half of 2022. What I'll also say, Walt has talked a little bit about and referred to some of the different consortium projects that are currently underway and currently funded. If you're interested in learning more about some of the projects that NOWRDC is funding, I would definitely suggest you go to our new website, which is great. If you haven't seen the new website, we really like it. Please go to www.nationaloffshorewind.org. And again, as I mentioned, if you go to that website, that is also where you can find this roadmap. If you go to nationaloffshorewind.org, at the top, you go to resources and then toolbox, and that's where you can find the roadmap. Another great way to learn about some of the projects that NOWRDC has been working on is to attend our 2021 Technical Symposium. That's going to be November 8th through 10th. That's a Monday through Wednesday. I know many of you probably attended our first Technical Symposium last year. We got a lot of great feedback on it. We're really excited for this year's as well. On our website, you'll find a link to register as a save the date for the symposium as well. So if you want to make sure that's on your calendar, I would definitely suggest doing that. And lastly, another great way to learn about some of our projects is to follow our Friday features and our social media spotlights. We have a new marketing intern who we're really excited to work with, and probably around the fall time, we're going to really start doing a lot of different features and spotlighting our really exciting projects. So definitely please keep an eye out for that. What I would like to do now is look into the chat and see if there's any questions that we may have. If you haven't put in any questions into the chat, now is a great time to do that. One question that I will repeat, or something that may be of interest to folks, is whether these slides or the recording will be available in the future. It will. So this webinar is being recorded, and we expect or anticipate to have this webinar up on the consortium's website, hopefully by next week. You'll all hopefully be following our social media, and I think we'll definitely announce it there as well. So one question we did get was regarding the second proposal call in 2022, which we had mentioned on our solicitation slide. The question was, will that also have available $4 million for that second call? And yes, that will likely be true. It will be $4 million available for this first call in late August, and then another $4 million for that second call in early 2022. We do have one question here regarding the capacity for international research cooperation with parties in the next proposal call. I don't foresee any difference from our previous solicitations, which did have opportunities open for working with international parties. So that is definitely something that is an opportunity for folks. Although, of course, we want to make sure that the prime is generally always working in the United States, and all benefits of these projects generally go towards the United States. Just looking through some of these questions now. Thank you to folks who are submitting your comments and questions into the chat. I see one question here regarding workforce development, and that is, does our focus area or challenge area in workforce development encompass technologies and training delivery capabilities, or is it limited to training institutions? I would definitely say that it's not limited to training institutions. If you're interested in what that may focus on specifically, definitely go into the roadmap and check out that section, but it's not going to be limited to training institutions, I don't believe. We also got a question regarding some examples of technology innovations for grid access and expansion and grid integration. That's a great question. There's two different ways to see some good examples that the consortium has focused on so far, or is targeting for the future, or maybe targeting for the future. And that is, one, to look at some of the past projects that we funded. And then a great way to do that is to either go to the technical symposium or to go to our website and see the list of projects that we're currently funding that focus on grid access, expansion, and grid integration. And another way to do that is to go into the roadmap itself. In the roadmap, we generally have different examples of different types of project areas or topic areas that could fall as topical as probable proposal topics under each of these categories. So that's a great way to get some ideas for that as well. We also got a question regarding the process for participating in the August 2021 solicitation. The main process is to keep your eyes out for our announcement. If you aren't already connected with the consortium on social media, or if you are anything like that, definitely go to our website, keep an eye out for that. We'll be making some announcements when that becomes available. And so once you see that solicitation has been published, that is when that process will begin. Also, of course, as I mentioned, that topic preview, which will be probably earlier in August, that's a great way to kind of get that preview and to see what's going to be in that solicitation. Okay. I see one question here for Walt, which looks like it's asking to rank various offshore wind development regions in terms of available geotechnical data and which areas may need more data. Walt, is this a question that you would be able to answer?
Well, no, I think that is the question that the consortium would like to have answered, and what the industry would like to have answered. I think it would be useful to have a database of geotechnical information that extends over all the regions where offshore wind might be deployed so we have in greater detail some idea of where what the challenges would be at the various sites. And we'd like to get that information out there before expensive geotechnical surveys have to be done. So I think that there are areas where it's probably better known than others, and I think it's mostly where the industry has already paid attention to what's down there in the seabed.
Thanks, Walt. We also received a question regarding the topic area technologies to reduce siting conflicts and whether this will focus mostly on technology or if this will be expanded to other kind of opportunities for engagement or stakeholder engagement as well. This will likely focus again on technology. However, again, if you're interested in what other topic areas may be relevant under this challenge area, the best way to do that is to go to the roadmap itself and kind of see some of those possible or proposed topics that could be falling underneath that category.
And Christine, I would say that the examples in the roadmap they're not limited to those examples. Those are examples in all cases. I would say that those are representations of what possible projects might look like.
Absolutely, I would underscore that as well. They are examples, they are ideas, but they are not in any means limited to those, definitely. So what I'll say now, I'm seeing a number of questions that are about the solicitation. I would definitely emphasize to folks who are interested in learning more about the solicitation that we will have more information about in a month or so in early August. Definitely keep an eye out for when we'll be submitting or showcasing some more information on that. That'll definitely be, I think, really helpful for those of you who are interested. What I'm going to do now is finalize our Q&A and move on to our very last slide, which is focusing on just thanking you all and wrapping up. So thank you again for folks who joined us today. I really appreciate your interest in the roadmap and of course in our next solicitation as well. Again, if you haven't already done so, save the date for our November technical symposium. You'll be able to hear from all of our current projects and see all the different and great work that they've been up to. Of course, follow us on social media if you don't already, on Twitter at NOWRDC or on LinkedIn. We'll be announcing a lot of different webinars, opportunities, information regarding the next solicitation and more through our social media. So please feel free to do that. I would like to thank Walt again for joining us today for all of his support. And I look forward to seeing all of you and chatting soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.